At New Balance, we believe if you run, you're a runner. However you choose to do it. Because when you're not worried about doing things the right way, you're free to discover your way. And that's what running is all about. Run your way at newbalance.com/running.
This episode is brought to you by Dogfish Head Craft Brewery. The Grateful Dead and Dogfish Head have gotten the band back together with the release of Grateful Dead Juicy Pale Ale, a light-bodied pale ale brewed with sustainable Kernza grains, granola, and heaps of good karma for a refreshing brew that's music to your taste buds. Available nationwide. Visit dogfish.com to find Grateful Dead Juicy Pale Ale in your neck of the woods. Dogfish Head Craft Brewery is located in Milton, Delaware. Please drink responsibly.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
You are now entering the Stone Zone. Well, the gross domestic product grew at 3% in the second quarter, which proves definitively that Trumponomics is working for America. Gross domestic product grew by 3% during the second quarter, surprising all the so-called experts who believe that Trump's tariffs would negatively impact economic growth. They predicted massive inflation. They predicted a softening of the dollar. They predicted high rates of unemployment. And they were completely and totally wrong. All of this is being done without the assistance of the Federal Reserve, which should, by all reasonable measures, lower interest rates. The unemployment and inflation rates today are either at the same level or lower than they were the last 4 times that the Federal Reserve cut rates. So one wonders what Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell is waiting for, unless, of course, he's trying to sabotage the economy. He's keeping the rates artificially high, stifling economic growth. I guess Powell thinks he's punishing Trump because Trump is making better tariff deals for America. Trump, of course, has caused for Federal Reserve Chair Powell to be removed. And also, it's a fact that Chairman Powell is being criminally investigated for his $2.5 billion in renovations to the already palatial Federal Reserve building in Washington, D.C. That's about a 70% cost overrun from the original budget, even by swamp standards. That's incredible. Both the Federal Housing the Federal Housing Administrator, Bill Pulte, and Donald Trump, both builders, both spent their lifetime in construction, have questioned how one could even spend $2.5 billion in a renovation. What must be understood is that the economy is succeeding not in spite of these tariffs, but because they're being implemented. President Trump's America First approach, where the nation actually uses its power to help the people, is already yielding major dividends. This will bring back American industry and reverse decades of damage caused by so-called free trade policies that helped boost corporate profits, but ultimately did so at the expense of the American people. Folks, we are entering the golden age, an unprecedented age of peace, prosperity, security, justice, and law and order. Meanwhile, the FBI Director Kash Patel has stated that he found crucial Russiagate documents locked in a secret room at agency headquarters in burn bags ready to be destroyed. These documents reportedly contain the classified annex to former Special Counsel John Durham's report. He prepared a report based on the intelligence he gathered. Durham looked into the FBI's behavior regarding Trump and Russia, but he missed a great deal. For example, Durham addressed the question of the phony Steele dossier. That's the controversial report paid for and fabricated by Hillary Clinton's campaign that claimed that Donald Trump had cavorted with prostitutes in Russia while visiting that country as a private citizen. But Durham never addressed the question of whether the computer servers at the Democratic National Committee had indeed been hacked by Russian intelligence, as many in the media and the Democrats claimed. Since that question was central to my own case, my own faux prosecution, when I went to a Soviet-style show trial in Washington, D.C., I can tell you definitively that the government has no forensic evidence that would prove that the DNC was hacked by the Russians. In fact, the actual forensic evidence is just the opposite. The download times on the servers indicate that the material that was later published by WikiLeaks was downloaded to some kind of portable drive and taken out the back door. But you're not allowed to say the name Seth Rich. It's of critical importance that these documents that Patel found be released to the American people, if you ask me. They were slated for destruction for a reason. It is in the public interest for these documents to be seen. There's already enough evidence to know that people like Barack Hussein Obama, James Comey, John Brennan, James Clapper are criminals who belong behind bars for their Russiagate treachery. Lock them up, I say. They must be made into examples so that no rogue bureaucrat ever decides to undo a presidential election in America's future. Donald Trump won in 2016. Bill and Hillary Clinton, who had far more experience in presidential politics than the novice Donald Trump, could not accept the result. So they had to claim falsely that Trump had had an assist from Russian assets and intelligence. It's a canard, folks. It was a lie then. It's a lie today. Meanwhile, Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas, a Republican, I would call him verbally flamboyant, is proposing to reduce President Trump's oversight over the intelligence community. Very specifically, the disclosures by the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, made within the last week would not have been possible if the law were the way Senator Cotton wants it to be written. While Gabbard is dedicated to a meaningful and intentional reforms, which reduces the actual size of the office by as much as a quarter, terminating 1 in 4 employees, Cotton's proposed legislation not only guts the office to a number which wouldn't possibly be able to oversee the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, and other entities, which were, of course, weaponized and managed from afar by the Obama administration. How on earth can 650 people coordinate and provide oversight for the sprawling 150,000 members of the intelligence community under 18 different agencies? Oh, but wait, it gets much worse. Under Senator Cotton's bill, the FBI would receive new powers, and they would get the authority to declassify documents that is currently rests in the hands of the Director of National Intelligence. Given the track record of the FBI in the entire Russiagate matter, where they used the Steele dossier as the rationale for opening Crossfire Hurricane, I don't trust the FBI to decide what pieces of national intelligence we should see. The very purpose of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence is to coordinate intelligence across the various agencies and departments, giving any president oversight and clean, balanced memos. President Trump and Director Gabbard have effectively used this agency to rein in some of these deep state thugs and uncover past crimes, including, of course, the most recently revealed coup by President Barack Obama against the duly elected president, Donald J. Trump. Then, of course, there was the case that upended my life, and then not to mention the case against General Michael Flynn. In my case, I was convicted of lying under oath to Congress about Russian collusion. But we now know that there was no Russian collusion. So one might reasonably ask, how is it possible to lie about something that actually never happened? Without the Tulsi Gabbard-run Office of the Director of National Intelligence, there is no hope, no prospect for reform of America's intelligence apparatus. Even as we speak, the CIA still got caught holding back key documents from Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna in her probe into the murder of President John F. Kennedy. The FBI and the CIA Both have denied key documents to Luna, who I think has done an incredible job. Just days ago, the CIA finally turned over the George Joannides files after 6 decades of claiming and insisting that they weren't tracking Lee Harvey Oswald. They never heard of the guy. They didn't know what he was doing. Well, it turns out that they were, in fact, for the 43 months prior to the assassination, reading his mail, tracking his movements, and in fact, they were handling him. They're the ones who placed him in New Orleans and set up the street demonstration where he was handing out pro-Castro flyers. He got into a scuffle with some local folks. And the purpose of this, of course, was to establish in people's minds that Lee Harvey Oswald was supposedly a communist. I think that the quick study of the 50-page bill that Senator Tom Cotton, a Republican of Arkansas, put forward, we see that it cripples the director's ability to continue investigating Obama, Clapper, Brennan, Susan Rice, Andrew McCabe, Rod Rosenstein. It really would stop the investigation in its tracks, not just through the dramatic staff reduction, but also by shifting the authority for declassification from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence over to the FBI. It also grows the FBI, who would, because of this transfer, have to add additional employees. These are materials that were used to catch Obama and Susan Rice in the act, but of course they would no longer be in the hands of Tulsi Gabbard. Generally speaking, Senator Cotton's bill demotes staff, cleverly allowing other agency staffs to outrank ODNI employees when they're searching for materials needed by the president or Director Gabbard. For example, under Senator Tom Cotton's bill, he removes deputies and reclassifies them as assistants. He takes away the word principals and changes directors to heads, thus making those people ineligible to see the classified documents. It also takes away various authorities and responsibilities over biothreats, over narcotics, over terrorism, and it shifts them back yet again to the FBI. Worst yet, in order to bait conservatives and the MAGA base, he adds a small section on ending DEI from hiring practices, something Director Gabbard has already done from day one. So don't be fooled. Senator Tom Cotton, even though he's a Republican, is empowering the same unelected career deep state stooges that got us into this mess to begin with. The president needs a strong but reform-minded director at the Department of National Intelligence, and he has some semblance of oversight over the intelligence community. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, who is Senator Tom Cotton really working for? It's an excellent question. I have said publicly that I hope to work with my good friend General Michael Flynn to recruit a Republican to challenge Tom Cotton in the Arkansas Republican primary. That state has a $50,000 filing fee. In other words, you have to pay $50,000 to the state just to get your name on the ballot. Personally, I think that's unconstitutional, and once we find a candidate, we're going to challenge that in court. But I am committed to help a candidate challenge Tom Cotton in the upcoming Arkansas Republican primary. Things haven't been this spicy in Arkansas since the days when Bill Clinton was trafficking enormous amounts of cocaine with the CIA into Mena, Arkansas, and Republican U.S. Attorney Asa Hutchinson simply looked the other way. You can find it in my book, The Clintons' War on Women. Republicans have a narrow margin in the House. When we come back, we're going to talk about redistricting and how it could impact that and put Republicans in much stronger position based on the actual population, not by counting illegal immigrants as American citizens. I'm Roger Stone. You're in the Stone Zone. Wherever you do, please stay with us. Don't leave the zone. We'll be right back.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back in the Stone Zone. Former Vice President Kamala Harris has announced that she will not run for California governor. She announced this on Wednesday, ending months of speculation following her 2024 defeat to Donald Trump in the presidential race. She said, in recent months, I've given serious thought to asking the people of California for the privilege to serve as their governor, Harris said in a prepared statement. I love the state and its people and its promise. It is my home, but after deep reflection, I've decided that I will not run for governor in this election. By the way, the polls showed that if Harris ran, she would easily win the Democrat primary and therefore most likely easily win the general election. It looks to me like the former vice president is escaping a mistake made by one Richard M. Nixon, who, in an effort to keep his presidential prospects alive after his skin-tight, razor-thin defeat in the 1960 election by John F. Kennedy, was talked into running for governor of California by President Dwight Eisenhower and New York Governor Tom Dewey, who, of course, was the 1944 and 1948 candidate for president. Nixon knew little about state issues like mental retardation, education, water rights, and so on. He had always had foreign policy and defense issues as his focus, and it showed in that campaign. Nixon started with a large lead in the governor's race, but just days before that November 1962 election, the Cuban Missile Crisis exploded when Nikita Khrushchev put nuclear missiles 90 miles from our shore. And the people, of course, rallied behind President John F. Kennedy, who then very quickly made a campaign stop in California to boost Governor Pat Brown, whose son Jerry Brown would also later be governor. So this decision, in my opinion, looks that Harris is actually preserving her ability to launch a 2028 White House run. Should she take that route, two people close to Harris say, while running for governor would technically preclude her from entering the presidential fray. The limits of a statewide campaign would have imposed on Harris were a consideration. This does keep the door open for 2028. One person very close to Harris told NBC News. That person said Harris came to this decision after months and months of conversations. It was a really tough decision. She really grappled with it, this source said. She was very, very conflicted. She wants to have the biggest impact she could possibly have. In the near term, of course, Harris is considering nonprofit work and setting up a super PAC, which is pretty standard for politicians today. Another close source to Harris said. She's also poised to campaign for other Democrats in the midterms, according to this same source. If I were running for office in 2026 as a Democrat, I'd think long and hard about whether I wanted Kamala Harris to come and campaign for me. But that party is such that now the new face of the party is not Kamala Harris, as far left as she is, as politically correct as she is, but the Ayatollah Zoran Mamdani, AOC, and the rest of the squad. That is the face of the Democrat Party. You're in the Stone Zone. I'm Roger Stone, right here in the Red Apple Audio Networks, and we'll be right back.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
With the startling revelations by Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, we now know that former CIA Director John Brennan was the chief orchestrator of the Russian collusion hoax. It was Brennan who insisted that the Steele dossier be included in President Barack Obama's intelligence report, even though Brennan knew that it was a fugazi, a total fraud. There's a reason why the CIA never really got cleaned up under Trump, and it's not because Trump didn't try. The deeper truth is that while President Trump was in office, Barack Obama's CIA was still fully operational. In fact, in many ways, it still is today. So it turns out that Brennan actually never left. His loyalists are still running the show at the CIA, blocking reform and quietly steering the agency against Donald Trump's America First agenda. He might be out of sight, make no mistake, but his fingerprints are all over Langley. Quoting from Revolver, the news is filled with revelations concerning actions of senior CIA officials in 2016 as a plot took shape to deny Donald Trump the White House. Fake allegations of collusion between Trump and Putin would be pushed via the vehicle of a garbage dossier paid for by Hillary Clinton and the Democrat Party. Are senior CIA officials now loyal to the sitting president and acting in accordance with the Constitution? Or are they still taking the directions from John Brennan? I saw him on MSNBC the other day, and he was continuing to insist that the Steele dossier might be right. The truth is, he knows better. This is the main question, though. It's not just about the past. It's really about whether the CIA is loyal to the American people or to some unelected cabal of Obama-era thugs, and that they're really the people still calling the shots behind the curtain. Brennan controlled promotions in the agency and the National Security Administration through his lackey, Hayden, for almost 12 years. After 12 years of seeding the intel community, you can permanently alter the complexion and effectiveness of any federal department, one former CIA operations officer told the folks at Revolver. Brennan's loyalists still run the top levels of the CIA, according to J. Michael Waller, a former CIA operative. The analysts who crafted the Corrupt Intelligence Community Assessment, or ICA, on Russia's meddling in the 2016 presidential election on behalf of disgraced former CIA Director John Brennan, an admitted communist, for example, are still very much in place at the CIA. Some of them have even been promoted under Donald Trump. So if you thought Russiagate was some bygone relic of the past, well, guess again. The same exact people who helped launch the Russian collusion hoax against Donald Trump are still collecting paychecks, and they're still holding tremendous power. The swamp was never really drained. Actually, they just dug in deeper. But here's the part most people really miss. Barack Obama never really cared about traditional legacy building like a typical politician. He didn't have any major domestic achievements, no great economic recovery, but what he did do was to reshape the intelligence community in his image. We know that Brennan controlled promotions in the agency for many years through his lackeys. First, he did so through the White House for 4 years, then as the Director of Central Intelligence. The agency was disloyal to their constitutional oath for the first term of Donald Trump, and they simply resisted or ignored Trump during his first term. Then Brennan heavily influenced and steered the agency during Biden's term. After 12 years of seeding the intel community, once again, you can permanently alter the actual department. So who is John Brennan? Well, he admitted in a government polygraph test that he was a communist, that he was a member of the Communist Party, and he supported the Communist Party candidate for president. He also is the man who signed and approved the visas of 4 of the Saudi hijackers who attacked America on 9/11. Brennan was caught red-handed spying on a U.S. Senate committee by essentially doing an online hack on the committee staffers' emails when that committee was investigating John Brennan's use of illegal torture as the CIA director. And of course, we now know that it was Brennan who basically pushed the phony Steele dossier into President Obama's intelligence briefing. They used the phony Steele dossier as the rationale for the launching of Crossfire Hurricane. That's the FBI's counterintelligence operation. They also used it to rationalize the appointment of Silent Bob Mueller. Until Mueller testified before Congress, we didn't really realize that he was non compos mentis. Obama's legacy is the complete weaponization of the CIA, the NSA, and the FBI against his political opponents. And it's that vast machinery, which was built by John Brennan and now still manned by his loyalists, that did the dirty work during Donald Trump's first term. That's why every attempt at reform was slow-walked or fully ignored. Donald Trump ordered the declassification of a number of the key Russia collusion hoax documents in his first term, but the bureaucrats of the CIA simply ignored them. Wasn't until acting National Security Advisor Rick Gannell pursued the declassification of those documents that we began to see what really happened. That's the bad news. They're still taking orders from Brennan. I think the Inspector General of the intelligence agency, of the CIA, should conduct an immediate investigation looking at emails and the phone systems, as well as cell phones, to see which CIA officials today are still communicating with the disgraced John Brennan. That's what I think the fix is. Erik Prince, the founder of Blackwater and himself a former CIA asset, spelled it out in plain terms in a recent interview. He was asked, what would you tell CIA Director Ratcliffe to do today? And Erik Prince, the Trump supporter who is the head of Blackwater, said, fire the bottom 40% of the people and unload most of the contracted positions as well. The fact is, during COVID, when only 20% of the building was actually showing up for work, the net collection and quality of intelligence went up substantially. So what does that tell you? You have way too many bodies, way too many people with clearances, just way too much nonsense. And that's why any good intelligence also gets leaked, because there's just too many people that are in that circle of knowledge. We learned just the other day that Mar Bitar, who is a pro-jihadi, pro-Palestinian CIA operative who had his hands deep in the Russian collusion hoax, now working for Senator Adam Schiff as his chief foreign policy and security advisor, but he still has a security clearance. I find this very hard to believe. I hope that Tulsi Gabbard is listening, or perhaps the FBI director, because at this point, Mar Bitar should not have a security clearance. We actually had the penetration of the State Department by Robert Malley. Malley was a high-level Biden official. Turns out that he was leaking all of the classified documents regarding Iran to the Iranians. This is the greatest single spy scandal since Richard Nixon caught Alger Hiss, the Russian spy working at the Roosevelt State Department. Interestingly enough, liberals in America insisted for years that Nixon's criticism and his pursuit of Alger Hiss was incorrect, was politically biased, insisted that Hiss, who himself insisted he was not a spy. Yet when the Soviet Union fell and the KGB records became available to the American public, we learned that Richard Nixon was right. Alger Hiss was indeed a communist Russian spy. In this case, Erik Prince points out that unlike other intelligence agencies that are twisted and tied down by red tape, the CIA is actually ripe for reform. He said the thing to do is to fire the dead weight and start afresh. I think he is absolutely right. If you think all of this is old news or ancient history, think again. The paths that were laid in 2016 are starting to crisscross in 2025 and beyond. Journalist Lee Smith, who's joined us many times here in the Stone Zone, is one of the few guys who nailed Russiagate from the get-go. And he's now wondering about whether John Durham, the special counsel who investigated the origins of the Russian collusion investigation, may have been quietly fitting John Brennan and his inner circle for orange jumpsuits down the road. It's interesting that a report from Brooke Singman of Fox says U.S. intelligence actually had credible foreign sources indicating that the FBI would play a role in spreading the Trump-Russia collusion narrative before the Bureau ever launched its controversial Crossfire Hurricane probe. This is indeed bombshell news. Obviously, the Durham probe didn't deliver sweeping arrests. Quite the contrary, actually. It took John Durham 5 long years to report to the American people things that journalists like Paul Sperry, journalists like John Solomon, journalists like Lee Smith had already discovered and reported on to the American people. But it did dig up a lot of rot. John Brennan, the former CIA director, wasn't just involved, he orchestrated the whole thing. And it's foolish for anyone to assume that he's finished. Sadly, I don't think Obama himself will ever face the consequences for what he built. David Schoen, the criminal defense lawyer, is absolutely right when he says that Obama could still technically, legally be impeached. And if he was impeached and convicted by the U.S. Senate, he would lose his immunity under that recent Supreme Court decision. But conviction in the U.S. Senate requires 2/3 of the Senate. And at this point, that is highly, highly unlikely. The cold, hard truth is John Brennan is just another story. His day, hopefully, will still come. The public knows who he is, what he did, and how long he's been behind the scenes pulling the strings. At this point, the only thing left to do is assign him a jumpsuit, preferably in an extra large size that is federal orange. If you're just tuning in, I'm Roger Stone, and this is the Stone Zone. The state of Texas is now redrawing its congressional maps in a way that will give Republicans 5 more deep red seats, showing the Trump Republican Party actually plays to win. Now, these 3 new House seats would be in and around the Austin, Dallas, and Houston areas, where 2 additional seats would be in southern Texas at the Rio Grande Valley under the new proposed map. Republicans have until August 18th to finish the rules, which is when the special session for the Texas state legislature concludes. Before President Donald Trump, Republicans would never have dreamed of doing something so bold. I mean, actually having a congressional redistricting map that reflects the citizens of the state of Texas and doesn't count illegal immigrants in the head count in congressional redistricting is, strangely enough, very novel. Now the Republican Party is becoming more aggressive and kicking the Democrats while they're down. This is what the Republican Party should have been doing for decades, but better late than never, I suppose. Meanwhile, my good friend Laura Loomer has loomered a top FDA vaccination official. This official is out after being brutally exposed by investigative journalist Laura Loomer. Dr. Vinay Prasad had written in 2020 that he hoped Joe Biden would defeat Donald Trump. He also signified that he was a far-left Democrat who supports abortions and illegal immigration. Loomer wrote, under Vinay Prasad's leadership, the Federal Drug Administration is adopting a European socialist stance on American health care and innovation. This is a radical shift that prioritizes restrictive policies over progress. His approach is a step backwards, stifling the innovation that has long driven U.S. medical advancements. Now, fortunately, thanks to the efforts of Laura Loomer, Dr. Prasad is history. I think that we owe Ms. Loomer a debt of gratitude for being so relentless in her vetting of Trump administration officials. Laura's making sure that Trump's agenda does not get subverted by enemies. Her relentless diligence is a credit to the American people, and I'm proud of the fact that she told Patrick Bet-David in a great interview only days ago that I was her mentor and that I inspired her to get into politics. Congratulations to Laura Loomer for taking another scalp and driving another never-Trumper out of the Trump administration. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump says that he's considering pulling 30% of the U.S. troops that are currently in Europe out. He says that he is going to take them out of the count, citing budgetary reasons and more of an emphasis on the Indo-Pacific region. That's because China, not Russia, is our largest adversary today. Right now, there are between 90,000 and 100,000 U.S. troops stationed in Europe as the U.S. plays world police officer with a global empire. There's no reason why the U.S. should be subsidizing the defense costs of wealthy European nations, including France, Germany, Poland, and others. This is what America First foreign policy looks like. Putting troops in European nations does not help the average American. These troops should not be subservient to other countries. They should only be deployed when they're absolutely necessary to win a just declared war. Once again, Donald Trump is changing the game. He is administering his America First agenda. I'm Roger Stone. We chronicle it all right here in the Stone Zone.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Back in the Stone Zone, there's now a bipartisan measure to restrict drug companies from buying advertising. A bipartisan coalition in the Senate is working to ban direct-to-consumer drug ads, the type of which have made America into the most drugged and overprescribed society in the history of the world. Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri is championing the cause from the Republican side, and they're expected to have support in the White House. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. told his followers to vote for Trump so that we can ban pharmaceutical advertising during the campaign last year. Now we're close to realizing this campaign promise. The MAHA agenda is of paramount importance. I think it is vital to make America healthy again. Big Pharma has controlled the federal government for far too long, to the detriment of the American people. It's time for their influence to be curtailed. Removing their ability to advertise their drugs would be a great start. I support Robert F. Kennedy's ongoing effort to stop the big drug companies from advertising on radio, television, and cable. They don't allow alcohol, for example, or cigarettes to be advertised. Why would we let these dangerous drugs be advertised? More power to Secretary Kennedy. Meanwhile, Anna Paulina Luna, the firebrand congresswoman from Florida, is leading the charge to ban insider trading by members of Congress. Anna Paulina Luna is planning to force a vote on her legislation that will stop Congress from being able to buy stock, ending legalized insider trading by elected officials. The measure was introduced by my good friend, Congressman Tim Burchett, and Congresswoman Luna, and they intend to force it to the floor for a vote in September when the legislature convenes once again. Congress is already subject to a 2012 law that bans lawmakers from buying stocks with insider knowledge, although no one thinks this rule is actually being enforced. Lawmakers such as, Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi and Congressman Dan Crenshaw have taken considerable flack over their stock portfolios and their knowledge of exactly when and what to buy. If congressmen and women are allowed to purchase stocks, they will find ways to abuse the system. That is why the process must be banned right away. Much respect to Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna and my good friend Congressman Tim Burchett for leading this effort. It makes common sense. These politicians have become wealthy on the basis of insider knowledge. It's time to end this practice once and for all. It is a major step in cleaning up the swamp of Washington, D.C. Thanks for joining us today in the Stone Zone. I'm Roger Stone, right here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. Until tomorrow, God bless you and Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to The Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear The Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?